Hi friends, happy to have you all back for part 2 of Iron Flame. If you are coming directly to this recording from social media or from YouTube, I definitely recommend listening to part 1. I did decide as I was editing that I wanted to break this up into 2 separate recordings because there was a lot to talk through, a lot of story and character development, and so I wanted to keep each recording at a decent length without getting too long, and decided mid-editing to make 2 episodes. So again, really happy to have you back for part 2, and let's go ahead and dive in. So as you go into part 2, Violet has been mended and healed, and she's in bed with Xaden, and they're in Ryerson House in Eurasia and safe, and you get a very passionate scene between the two of them, very much romantic-y vibes. And you realize that it's the first moment in a long time where they can, albeit they're in a moment of passion, that they can just breathe a little bit and like just be with each other and be free, if you will, in a way. And it's short-lived, obviously, because it's, just that initial part of that chapter. But it's a moment in time where you get so caught up, just like the characters are, in the moment and in the passion and in the fact that they're not worried about anything else, that, when the dust settles, it's like, oh, this is what you would hope that normal life could be. And that just so quickly changes. As they leave the room, Violet realizes that now in Xaden's house, everybody's there. There's all these people who have fled. He is basically putting them up for safekeeping. And you're fully in the revolution now. It's like that moment of peace and that moment of being able to be free, you snap right out of it because you're just right back in the middle of chaos, because these people they're in places they don't know what's going to happen. They're not in their homes, not all of their friends went, like people are now divided. It's just kind of crazy, right? And so they quickly have to be able to figure out what the heck is going on. And of course, the people at the head of the revolution are pissed because now everyone knows about it. They feel like that was their advantage to this whole situation with the venin. And now it's like, now that everybody knows, it's going to be chaos. And not that they had control of the situation, but they had more say, I think, when less people knew. But now that everybody knows, it's like the decisions that others make, for example, at Basgiath, could impact them at Ryerson House. And so there's just a lot more risk. But I do want to clarify that not everyone knows this. The public doesn't know. A lot of the general public doesn't know. But one of the things that does happen is Xaden takes wyvern bodies from the past fights and drops them at outposts. Because again, this is like as if I today was to see a dragon. You talk about it in stories like this and in myths, but it's not like we see them flying around every day. And so that's what wyverns are to a lot of people in this story. And so Xaden had dropped wyvern carcasses at different outposts to prove that this is real and they're a real threat. And so at least cadets and people on the front line are aware, even if the general public isn't. The other thing is that as the beginning of this part 2 happens and Darna wakes up. And so, when they were leaving the college, Taryn did say, I'm going to have to wake her up. She obviously has to come with us. But he was also worried about how long she'd been sleeping. He didn't know what was going to happen. And ultimately what he ends up saying, because we interrupted her dreamless sleep and just everything that's gone down with her at such a young age, she is now a little underdeveloped. And so she can't really fly. And also, as she's been growing and developing, she's not a child anymore. She's a teenager, basically. So she has a shit ton of attitude. She's grumpy towards everyone, including Violet, but at least she's there and she's awake, which is a huge deal. As life kind of starts to go on, some of the teachers that are there are like, we're going to teach. This is real life now. It's not school, but everything that we teach you is still applicable. You all are so still unprepared for everything that's happening. Because mind you, they have some first years with them. Xaden is a graduate, sure, and there are a lot of them, but Violet hasn't graduated. Her school isn't done. They have a bunch of young people with them that they're like, well, we're going to just continue to teach you. So they try to get into this flow of certain types of lessons and education as they're there in the Ryerson house. And Violet also continues looking at Warwick's journal and reading books and just trying to understand what is happening in these journals and also in terms of controlling the ward and trying to still figure out how to erect a ward and put one in place to protect them, because they're all now out from the protection of any ward. as they're there in Eratia, Mira ends up showing up. She comes with a bunch of Griffin riders, and at first they think that it's like an attack, but they quickly realize that it's Mira and whatever. And so then Mira obviously realizes that Brennan is alive and just punches him and gets super mad about it. And so that goes on for a little while. Obviously, she has to now process the situation and everything that is happening. But Griffin riders are coming. They're called flyers. And so you just have a different mixture of people. You have students, you have people who've been in the revolution for a while, you have flyers and griffins and dragons, and everybody is kind of mixed together as they're trying to figure out what to do and how to fight this battle. There is a lot of uneasiness with everything that's happening and them not knowing exactly what the path forward is going to look like. There's a lot of tension between dragon riders and griffin flyers. They obviously inherently have always thought the other was bad. It's not an easy melding together. So there's just a lot of tension, which really puts you as a reader in a place of feeling like you're in battle, because that's what this is. Like, this is war. And so you feel the tension of one side of that war pretty well and pretty distinctly. So one of the other elements of all of this is, in order to put up a ward, I don't think they need this thing, but it certainly would help, which is a luminary. And so there's this ruler, Takaris, who they all know about, that has a luminary. And they've talked for a while about it. But Xaden has always kind of been like, no, because he wants Violet. So they've had an interaction before. And because of her power, and Takaris is like this eccentric guy who collects things, Xaden's like, he's going to try to keep you. You are a rarity. And like, I'm not going to let that shit happen. But ultimately, they just get to this place where it's like, I don't think we have a choice. And the reason why they think that is because as Violet is reading the text in Warwick's journal, it talks about the 6 most powerful. So she is thinking, well, maybe it's the 6 most powerful riders. And so she takes that group of people, which includes herself and Xaden, and most of her friends are them. And they try to imbue this stone and raise a ward, and nothing happens. And mind you, to get to that place took a lot of effort and studying and whatever. And it's like the point in the movie where you're hopeful and everything's leading up to this moment, and it just falls flat. And she feels like such a failure, and she feels so embarrassed and so let down by the entire situation that's when they get back to this discussion about Takaris, and she's like, we have to try. So a lot of them go, and what ends up happening is, because Takaris, he's like this sneaky guy. He basically is like, they do whatever, dinner and have time together and whatever. And he's like, if you want to leave, like, come onto this field, show me that you can wield, and then you can go. He has always just wanted to see Violet wield. That's all that he's wanted to do. She goes down with Mira and Brennan, because they're at least like, hell no, we're not letting her go by herself. So the whole family goes. And essentially, this box that he has ends up having a venom in it, and all hell breaks loose. Mira ends up getting injured. Brennan has to like cart her off. Xaden like ends up throwing down a bunch of his daggers that she ends up taking and throwing, and ultimately ends up pinning the venom and striking him with lightning. And of course, Xaden tries to kill Takaris, because he's like, screw you, dude. You wanted to see her wield, but why did it have to be this way? Like, and, he tries to talk his way out of it, but ultimately he doesn't end up killing him. And they, for the sake of just moving forward in peace, Violet ends up negotiating to be like, give me this damn luminary. So ultimately they give him some weapons, because again, people are now knowing, or they knew the whole time, but are just being obvious about the fact of the threat of the venom and all of that. They're like, fine, we'll give you weapons if you give us the luminary. And so they do. And that is a huge piece of their process to try to go back and make a ward for Eratia. So part of their deal with Takaris, though, is to take Griffin riders with them. So when they travel back, they have to go a different way, because Griffins can't fly as high as dragons. And as they make their way, Riddick ends up getting hurt, and you learn a little bit more about how riders or flyers end up bonding with their griffins, and just the fact that essentially they feel like the riders are so much more cruel in the way that they train, and like they're bringing into being a rider, because they let so many people die during that process, whereas when you're a flyer, it just, nobody dies from training and from like class, which, valid point, because Basgiath is crazy with their writers, but you just kind of start to see the differences. Even if they're starting to understand each other, you know that the Griffin writers are just a little bit of a tamer breed. Everything is just a little bit tamer. Anyway, they get back, and what really starts to happen is the fact that now that Kat is with them, so Kat is Takaris' niece, and she's Xaden's ex, and now that she's one of the liars that's at the Ryerson house, and you come to learn that Xaden never loved her, but that they were betrothed, and it was part of like a political type of situation, and she couldn't understand why he wouldn't want that type of alliance, right? Xaden, of all people, can understand that type of political move. She is stunning and gorgeous and talented and really good at what she does, and ultimately he didn't want to be with her. As days go on and they have their trainings, because remember, the professors are trying to put them back into this like training and kind of school situation, Violet and Kat end up having like a little face-off as a part of training. And what you come to find out is that Griffin writers have powers in a little bit of a different way than writers do, but Kat can manipulate the emotions that somebody is already feeling. So if they're feeling happy, she can amplify it. If they're feeling sad, she can amplify it. So Violet was starting to like already feel some kind of way about Kat from the get. But as they're fighting and Kat is talking about Xaden and their sex life and all this stuff, like, oh, this trick and that trick, like, who do you think taught him that? Just stuff that really makes your skin crawl. Like, she also has a very punchable face like Varish, and Xaden ends up intervening and being like, that's her power. That's what she does. Because Violet didn't know it at the time, right? She didn't realize why she was being so amped up. She just knew this girl drove her nuts. But he's like, you have to control yourself and be more zen, because if you're more zen, she can't get to you, kind of thing. So you just realize that now you have in the mix of, going back to the whole thing about like Griffin writers being in the house with the flyers, the tension, whatever, you have this vibe too immediately in the forefront because of Violet being the main character, with Kat, where it adds this layer of really disjointed living. And ultimately, even at one point, like the teachers are like, you guys got to stop all this. Like, but just in general, the writers and the flyers are so at odds and want to freaking kill each other and just like don't trust each other. They're like, we have such bigger problems. You guys got to get over it and just let it go. Like, we don't have time for this. And so, it doesn't necessarily fix everything, but they try to find a middle ground to be able to keep learning and persist together. Obviously, around all of this is still the fact that this big war and like battle is really with Wyvern and Venom. And so a couple of things start to happen. Violet and Dane end up having an interaction because Dane chose to go with them and kind of clear the air a little bit. And he ultimately is like, I will help you, because Lyra's journal, it has to be translated just like Warwick's did. So Dane's like, I'll help you. Also, Violet is training with Felix, who's a new instructor. He makes her a conduit that is warded, and it has ward symbols on it. And essentially he says, like, until you can aim and truly control your signet, you can channel into this. And so this will help you release what you need to release without totally harming or damaging other people. So she's learning how to use that and still practicing how to strike. And this goes back to something that I said earlier about how I have been wanting Violet to just rage in the best way when it comes to her signet. I want her to step into her power. And after everything she's been through, if there ever was a time for that to come to a head where she just really becomes this true badass that she can be, it would be now, because of everything. All these heightened emotions she's gone through, Brennan being back, people dying, people getting injured, people coming after her, the revolution, just all of this stuff. You would think that, like I had said earlier on, that she is changing as a person, right? Like, again, imagine that right now your whole world changed from today into tomorrow to where everything that you thought was true wasn't. And it was all a lie or different. And the way that you go through life has shifted. That has happened for her. And it is such a significant thing for anyone to experience that kind of shift, that I was just thinking, if that isn't the thing that gets her to really come into her own, then what is? Yes, she's trying her best with Felix and all of this stuff. But I remember when I'm thinking back now to when I was reading this for the first time, how frustrated I was. Like, why is she not there yet? Why is this so hard for her? I understand it's a huge power. She's literally using lightning from the sky. Her ability to do that is very powerful. But what lightning is and the energy source that it is such a power in and of itself. To control that takes a lot. And I get that, but I'm also just like, what is it going to take? And again, as smart as she is, as much as she seems to always get through situations, you know, she has these badass dragons, not one but two, and not one black one but two black ones. Like, what are we talking about? When is she going to just rip and roar? And so these are the types of moments where I would find myself frustrated because I'm like, when is this going to happen? So anyway, just a side note on that, because I know I kind of talked about it early on and how that repeated for me. And it definitely has shown up, especially because like these are the worst of times. So if there is ever a time to show up and show out and to just like imagine her flying with Taryn and just being able to be like zap, 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 like almost point a finger exactly where she wants it to go. This girl would be unstoppable. And that's the whole point of why everybody wants to kill her or wants her or whatever. Just when is your time to shine in that way? So I do remember being really kind of frustrated by that. So throughout all of this, a couple of things that I want to touch on has happened that are really important. A new dragon hatchling has been birthed. And why they mention it is because the power that comes from that, like the unleashing of a dragon unleashes power. And remember, like dragon eggs are magic as well. So like ripple effect of magic kind of goes out into the world when that happens. And the reason why they find out about it is not just because it's notable in and of itself, but it's because the venom can feel that. And so if they're within a certain distance, they can feel that. So it raises you the alarm to be like, we have to be prepared because they could potentially come. And so you just have that underlying note that like beautiful things are happening. And they have a new hatchling ground, and that's really exciting. But now you have one more thing to protect for one, but two, it could be a threat because of the venom. Because they not only will feel it, but they'll come because the grounds are going to then be ripe with magic. And so because venom channel from the earth, then ultimately that would be like the freaking Super Bowl of places to just go and channel from. So they're on edge because of that. All the while, Violet is still trying to translate the journals, and her and Dane ends up realizing that one of the words that they thought was something isn't in the translation, and that it's not like the best of the best riders or people, it's dragons. And so they get a renewed hope. So they have new information, and they're really excited about the development of that because that changes everything. And now at least they have something else to try. But the big rub with all of this is that if the wards go up, the flyers don't have their powers anymore. So the difference is that riders always, like once they get their signet, they have it, right? As long as they're in good health and they're alive, they have that power and they can use it whether they're inside or outside of a ward. But with the flyers, they can't. And so there are obviously a lot of them that are around, and they have to have that conversation of like, you guys aren't going to be able to use whatever talents that you have. But what Violet does tell them is like, if you use this particular stone, you can imbue it with your power, which means that even when the ward is up, you may be able to then channel from the stone that already had your power from before to use it in that moment. And obviously it would be limited, but it's possible. And the reason why that matters is because it's the same as the conduit. When Violet doesn't have control over her power in terms of where to aim it, and she needs to release some energy, she can use her conduit because there's a stone inside of it that will take her power and like hold it essentially. So she can kind of let it out without randomly spiking people with her lightning that she can't control. So this stone that she tells the flyers about is kind of similar. You can channel your power into it and it holds it. And everyone just kind of accepts that even begrudgingly. So as everybody continues to kind of prepare for this, they still have training. They start to learn about runes, and Rhea is like, let's go, learn about runes and like practice and all this kind of stuff. So they go out, a bunch of them, and a couple of things happen. One of the things is that I can't remember if you're reminded or you're told for the first time that when a dragon ends up having a rider and then that rider dies and then they take another rider from the same bloodline, that rider gets 2 signets. And Violet, I think it is the first time that you learn about it, because Violet has the realization that Sigale was his grandfather's dragon. And so he has to have a second signet. And so she files it in her memory bank because she's like, yet again, what is he not telling me? Why is he continuing, right? Because even still, with everything that's going on, Xaden has a different role in all of this. Violet is in school and learning and training. Xaden isn't. Like, he graduated, he's a lieutenant, he, is running Ryerson House, like he has all this other shit going on. And they are living 2 different lives, kind of 2 different purposes in the same world. And she just is like, okay, yet another thing that he's never told me or talked to me about. Like, WTF, right? But anyway, why that comes up is because not just because of the dragons, but is because Sloane is like, because you have 2 dragons, that's also unusual. A dragon having riders in the same bloodline's a little unusual. You having more than one, like, that's never been done before. So maybe you have 2 signets too. And it would be interesting to see what that is. And, we file that away too, because we're like, okay, well, maybe. And then while they're out, they end up getting into a situation where they freaking run into a dragon, and surprise, surprise, it's Varish's dragon. As they fight him, Violet ends up protecting Kat from the dragon, and Darna intercedes because Violet gets hurt and ends up killing Varish's dragon. And as Sloane and Kat take her out of the cave, Sloane ends up draining Violet's power. She can feel it, and she starts freaking out, and Violet's like, it's okay, it's your signet, like you're a siphon. And it's the first time that this has ever happened, and they realize that that's what Sloane's signet is. So Kat ends up kind of respecting Violet a little bit for her having her life saved. And when they get back to, Violet also asks Xaden, like, what is your second signet? And they talk about the whole trust within the relationship and whatever that is. And Xaden doesn't really get to answer her immediately because they get alerted that a bunch of wyverns are coming. And so Violet ends up going to the dragons, including Yandarna, and saying, like, you aren't black. You're not a black dragon. You're another kind of dragon. You have to be a different kind of dragon. And so you're part of this whole 6 powerful dragon situation, and we need y'all to imbue your power into this stone. And so they do that, and they don't know if the ward is actually going to work or not, but they try. And so as they're preparing, Xaden ends up telling her that his second signet is the ability to read people's intentions. So the only signet that manifests where they get killed immediately is when they can read people's minds. And the reason why they end up knowing that people can do that a lot of the times is because when your signet first manifests, it's really sudden and out of control, kind of like it was for Sloane, where you're really jolted. And so if people are around you, it's hard not to notice that something is going on or that somebody's going through something. And it's usually because their signet's manifesting. And so when it manifests for somebody who can read minds, their mind opens to everyone's thoughts immediately. They have no ability to cut it off or whatever. And so they freak out. But that is how a lot of times people end up knowing that they're intrinsics, and then they end up killing them right away. And in the first book, if we think all the way back, you end up seeing that happen. A kid on campus starts freaking out and yelling and clutching his head because his signet manifests, and the teacher snaps his neck immediately. It is the most, people are the most scared of that and want none of them in their population. And it's so his ability to read people's intentions is different, but it is intrinsic. And he's like, no one knows. Not a single person knows that I can do that because they will kill me. And he's like, it's not the same. I can only read your intent. I can't read your mind. If you're thinking something, I don't know that, right? But if you are having a conversation, he doesn't say this, but I'll just put it into context. If Violet and him are having a conversation and she's mad at him or something like that, he's not going to be able to read her thoughts and know what she's thinking. But if they're having a conversation and she's trying to maybe beat around the bush or get information out of him because she wants to go on a mission, but she doesn't want him to know, he will feel or know the intent that she's going to go do something, kind of thing. That's the way that I understand it. So she feels violated to some degree, mostly just because of the untruth. I think if I remember correctly, she ends up questioning him, like, did you end up being with me because you knew that I had the intention to like have feelings for you, or that I wanted you physically, and so you sought that out as an opportunity? Like, did you use that against me and manipulate me? Like, it all just unfolds, right? Because she's questioning everything, because every time that she's out and about or with other people or whatever, little bits come up, and it's always from other people. Xaden never is the one to tell her. He never is the one. Like, she confronted him about Kat. She unwillingly found out about the revolution. She unwillingly found out about Brennan. She asked him about the signet. Like, everything is always her finding out and him not sharing, no matter how much she's asked and asked and asked and asked time and time and time again for him to be honest with her. There's always this layer, and it's always like, protecting. He doesn't want her to be in danger, but also there is this part where she's like, you don't trust me. You may sit here and say that you love me, but you don't trust me with all of your secrets, and that's a problem. Obviously at the height of Wyvern are actively approaching them, figures out this other signet. She's worried for him because it is dangerous, but yet she's pissed. And so you're just in this place of a bunch of uncertainty during a time of tension, which, classic theme for this book, so no surprise. Ultimately, they end up realizing that the Wyvern can't get through and that the wards worked. And so, they're feeling really good about the fact that they translated Warwick's journal accurately and that it worked with the dragons, and they're feeling really solid about that. I actually just really quickly peeked, and I think that I've said in this part of the recording that Violet had Lyra's journal. She actually doesn't have it. It's only been Warwick's up until this point. I remembered incorrectly because it was using the stone with the 6 riders was Warwick's journal, but also the dragons was Warwick's journal. I thought for a second that the dragons came from Lyra's journal, but it wasn't. It was solely from Warwick's journal. And again, they figured it out because Dane realized that they were translating one of the words wrong, or Violet had just misunderstood it slightly. So they don't have Lyra's journal yet because it was kept at the school when Nolan had it from back when Varish was around, and it ended up staying there once everybody dipped out. The journal is there. So the reason why all of this matters is because one of the flyers ends up telling Violet that she can still use her power, or like eventually she tells her that she can. And she's not going around like touting this, but she does tell Violet. And so they say that because they realize that something's wrong. The wards then aren't fully functioning, and so something is happening. And all the while that goes down, Melgren reaches out from Basgiath and says that he wants to meet. So some of them go. Violet's mom is going to be there, which is partially why they go, to just, they assume that no like fight is going to happen, or Melgren's not going to turn on them. So they go and they meet, and they see Melgren and they see her mom, and like, Mira's there and whatever. And Melgren says that he feels like Samara is going to get attacked, because Melgren's power, which I haven't talked about like at all, is he could see the future, but he can't see it if a certain number of people from of marked kids from the rebellion are present. They like interrupt his ability to fully see the future. And so that is important to know, because they're talking and he says that he has seen that Samara is going to get attacked, and that he's worried about it because it will affect the wards that are at Basgiath and that are like protecting Navarre, and he wants their help and whatever. But as they're talking about this, Brennan is actually there and ends up coming into view. And so this is the first time that Violet's mom knows that Brennan is alive. And ultimately, they come away from it where her mom just says, I just want my kids to be safe. And she ends up giving Violet Lyra's journal, or Lyra's journal. That's why I checked, because I remembered that significant things went down when Violet went and saw her mom and met up with Melgren and whatever, but I couldn't put it together. So that's how I pieced that all back together. But anyway, she just wants her kids to be okay. And what she has always said is that she feels like what Warwick had put in the journal for his wards was a lie, because in the like knowledge that they have of the history of these individuals, Warwick only cared about Navarre. And so any knowledge he left for other areas to use wards was always going to fail, because even though it worked with the dragons, it was never foolproof, because he didn't want other places to ultimately survive. He wanted Navarre to be the best and to reign supreme, where Lyra wanted everyone to live. And so her journal actually has the truth of how to do it. The sentiment from Lyra is always that she wanted the magic to be shared and like the knowledge to be shared. So part of what she says is that you got to cut open wyverns and like, just trust me. So they take all of this knowledge back. They don't end up wanting to take Melgren's offer because Brennan's like, hell no. Because mind you, Brennan is like one of the leaders of the revolution. So what he says goes, and he's like, no, we're not helping you worth a damn. And part of it though, throughout this discussion, is that, you know, Melgren basically says like, Samara's going to get attacked and they're going to win. But if y'all will fight with us, like, we'll let you be free, right? We won't come and get you or attack you from Navarre. You can just do whatever it is that you want. But Brennan was ultimately like, hell no, because he doesn't trust Melgren. And he just thinks that he's up to no good. And ultimately, you know, doesn't want to have anything to do with him. So when they get back from all of that, they start cutting open wyvern and they realize that they have runes inside of them and that is part of what they're going to need for their protection and to be able to kind of make it through this battle. And she also ends up finally getting a conduit from Felix that has a strap. And this was important when I was reading because she's dropped it before and it's broken. And obviously that can't, like, if you think about holding like an orb in the middle of battle, like how does that work, right? So if she needs it, she can like flick it up and hold it, but then it can just be on her wrist and hang. So I remember marking that down when I was researching because I don't know, it's not really that significant, but I guess when she's flying and all of that stuff, it's just a little ingenuity, a little allyship from Felix to just know he's really trying to help her and to really be there for her. And I think, if I can pause here for a second, I think why it frustrates me about her and her inability to hone her skills that I mentioned before is because she's had so many people stick their necks out for her. Even though Nolan ended up being a POS, he was there for her in the beginning. He wanted her to be the best that she could be. He supported her originally, right? Felix is kind of the same, right? He's in this place of mentorship and trying to help her and doing what he can to like be better for her so she can be better. And it's just so irritating. And again, it's a double-edged sword because I know that she is trying. I know she's not just sitting on her ass in these books, but it is frustrating. It's a trying thing with me and Violet. But ultimately, as she continues to like study and to practice and all this stuff, she's reflecting on what Melgren had said, and she still thinks that Brennan should take the deal. She didn't necessarily agree with not. She feels like it's worth it to help them in order to be free in the end, right? Because if they help them, they'll have their help in return. So more bodies. But what she realizes is that if Samara does fall, it wouldn't actually end up hurting Navarre or like being the end of Navarre. Navarre would suffer. It is a big deal for the overall lands of Navarre if Samara falls. But Samara just is a part of the wards. So it wouldn't be good if it fell, but it wouldn't be the end of Navarre. And Violet realizes that while she had wanted, so on the other side of me just saying that she wanted to help Melgren and felt like it would be a good idea, what she starts to come to realize is that he probably wanted them to go in hopes that a lot of them died because they would be less of a problem and a threat to him in whatever future world. But even if they failed and everyone died, it for the cause, quote unquote, for the cause, it wouldn't be the end of Navarre. So he was trying to essentially manipulate them to be like, come and help us. Not that Samara isn't going to get attacked. It is. But he was willing to ask for help for something that wasn't going to be the end of Navarre in the hopes that it killed a lot of them, which is just some Melgren bullshit, right? And that's where you start to realize that Brennan isn't just this unreasonable protector of the revolution and unruly. He knows some shit, right? And Violet obviously is still really young in the game, and she needs to kind of realize that she has a lot to learn, obviously. So ultimately, through all of this, Violet still says that like regardless of it all, we have to fight though. Through anybody that is going to get attacked by venom, anybody that's at risk, it doesn't matter. We have to show up and we have to help them. We can't just shy away from people getting attacked and dying because it's not right. Like, regardless of Melgren's agenda, regardless if Brennan is right, if Melgren is shady, we can't just let areas that have our people or innocent people or defenseless people get torn up by these guys. They have to fight. So even though Melgren is a sneaky dude, what she realizes is that if the battle at Samara happens and it weakens the wards for Navarre, even though it wouldn't be the downturn of Navarre, it does just that. It would weaken the wards. And in weakening the wards, that means that Basgiath is vulnerable. And what Violet realizes is what I said earlier, which is that because Melgren can't see the outcome when there's like a group of children from the rebellion at a place together, he can't see the outcome of Basgiath because they're there. The children of the rebellion did not all go with Xaden and them to Erasia, right? Some of these kids, regardless of what Xaden did and sacrificed for them, stayed. And so there's a bunch of them there, which means Melgren can't see that he's even in danger. So while the attack at Samara is going to happen, it's just the first piece in weakening the wards for Navarre and Basgiath to be able to go there and to attack. And so Violet realizes this and says, like, we have to go. We have to help them, and we got to get there and make sure that we can save them. So ultimately, everybody suits up. They go to Basgiath. She warns her mother. And in all of the kerfuffle of being on campus and whatever, they end up coming upon Jack Barlow's dragon, and he's by the wardstone. And essentially what ends up happening is Jack breaks the wardstone, or through the tussle it breaks. And so the wards, are coming down. And what ends up happening is freaking Jack kills his own dragon, but what you realize is Jack is Venom. So what comes to light is Nolan says that Jack has been Venom the whole time, and that what he was trying to do was not save Jack's life, but to save his soul. He was trying to heal him from being a Venom. So when Violet brought that mountain down on Jack, he must have done something to channel and protect himself, albeit severely injured and whatever. He must have tried to protect himself and survive by channeling from the earth, becoming a Venom. And they captured him and held him prisoner and tried to heal his soul, which Nolan could not do. Why they ended up releasing Jack, or Jack was just out in the world, I think is because he might have faked it, right? That's why he was being nice. He might have made it seem like he was better, but the reality was he was just a Venom on the inside the whole time, and he was a part of the attack. Jack ended up being the man on the inside. His goal was always to wait until they attacked Samara, wait until the wards were weak, then break the wardstone so that ultimately it would all just come crashing down. And even though, Nolan's intent was positive to try to help Jack and save his soul for the sake of potentially saving other people, Nolan still got his wires crossed. His boundaries were gray, and that doesn't go unchecked. So ultimately now Basgiath is not protected, and they realize what they've always realized and how they've kind of trained, which is go for the wielders. If you kill the wielders and the Venom, then the wyvern will fall. So don't try to spend your time killing wyvern, because basically if you kill a wyvern without, I don't remember, I think if you kill a wyvern and you don't take the rune out of it, or fully dismember it or some crazy stuff, then it will reanimate and come back to life. The only way to kill it is to kill its creator. So eventually a bunch of people show up. Everyone's there. Brennan comes, and Violet asks him to try to mend the wardstone. So he starts trying to work on that. Jacinia brings is still there, trying to do her scribely things and help to figure out what can happen. And they basically go on into this full-blown battle. And it's brutal. Rhee ends up getting really injured trying to save Violet. Sawyer gets his freaking leg bit off. They're in full-on battle. And I think that it's not the first time, right? Because Violet's been out with squads before, and some of those squads have had her best friends. Her group of best friends themselves have been in situations with that RSC training and being tortured and whatever. They're all really capable, but you start to realize the impact of this battle because they're getting injured, right? And it's not that they're not capable. It's that this is war, and it's serious, and it's real, and it's heavy, and they're getting their asses handed to them, and they're kicking butt and taking names also, but it's brutal, right? And so freaking Sage is there, which is the main like Venin guy that wants Violet. So all of the other Venin kind of like report into this guy. And they always, anytime a Venin would approach her, they always talk about like bringing her back for him, or like he wants you, and that he is the Sage. And so when she's back on the ground, she's like, I have to get the wards back up. And so she goes to check on Brennan and tries to bring him back up. And she just is channeling all of her power into it to the point where she's going to burn out. And mind you, Xaden can feel her, right? They're connected. He can feel her energy and knows that she's getting close to burning out. And he's not there. He's off fighting. And in the heat of the moment of all of this, Violet's mom ends up basically attacking Violet to get her to stop channeling to the ward stone because she's going to kill herself, and tells Sloane, who's there, to siphon her power. So Violet's mom is like, siphon mine and my dragon's power into this ward stone. Because if you take it, then it's going to be more and much more than like I could even give, kind of thing. And Sloane reluctantly does it. And ultimately, Violet's mom ends up dying, as does her dragon. But it works. So let's pause there. It works. And the wards go back up. And ultimately, a lot of the Venin disengage. But you know it's not fully over. But this is done. It's done. But ultimately, Violet's mom has died in the process. And so when Violet and Xaden, when the dust settles and they come out from all this, and find each other at the end of this battle, Violet realizes that Xaden's eyes are red. And what you come to find out is that when Xaden was also fighting, I think he was fighting the Sage while Violet was trying to do that. And he could feel her dying from being close to burning out. But he was also fighting the Sage, and the Sage was talking a bunch of mess to him and like getting in his head and whatever. He essentially ended up channeling from the earth, because as Violet was dying, he's feeling that. So he's not his best. He's like dying with her, kind of. And he didn't know what to do. So he channeled from the earth to try to have enough energy for himself to survive, to like give to her to survive through their bond, not knowing that like she was going to end up getting kicked in the face by her mom and like ultimately stopped, because he didn't know what was causing her to do that. He wasn't there with her physically. So the Sage lives. Some Venin still survive. Of course, they're going to go off and do their Venin thing and certainly will be back. And you end the book realizing that Violet's mom is dead and Xaden is a Venin. And when I say that, he's not a full-on Venin, but he's channeled from the earth, which means that he has had a taste and he's already broken the codex and the ultimate rule. And if he does it once, he'll be more inclined to do it again. And the more that you do it, the more it corrupts your soul and you turn evil and become a Venin. And that's where the book leads off. So holy crap. Okay. So much goes on in this book. And I want to talk for a minute. I know I have been talking. This is a long episode. I appreciate anybody who has bared with me through this recording. This is a big one. And so much stuff has happened and so many important things needed to be talked about, because a lot of what happens in this book is character building. A lot of it is shaping the characters. It's shaping their relationships with each other. It's shaping the bonds that they have. It's really forging a different kind of alliance and trust and reliance on each other through the name of war, while also questioning the relationship of Violet and Xaden with all the trust issues and miscommunications. Well, not miscommunications, but lies and secrets and whatever. So much happens and so much character development and so much evolves throughout this story that you want to do that. You want to take a big sigh, because it's like it's over, and yet it's just the beginning. The Venin have showed up time and time again. They've taken lives. Violet has continued to see other enemies within her own walls. And all of these different provinces and areas of the earth and towns and whatever are all kind of against each other, but with each other. It's all of that strife that happens in the world, where you have bigger enemies that you fight in war, but yet inside your own areas, you have your own issues that happen. And that, obviously, we know that happens in the real world every day. It's the same concept here. So you feel like when it's done, you're like, okay, we made it. But then you roll right into this place where Xaden is now compromised. And if people know, he will die. And so you realize that you're going into Onyx Storm so unsure of what's going to happen, so uncertain. And it puts us back into that place of needing Violet to be who the F she's going to be so soon and so quickly and so urgently, because she has to be. She can't not step up. This is the time, like, there's always something. There's always something more that needs Violet's attention, that she's pouring herself into. There's one thing after the next. This is her man. This is her love. This is her forever. She has to step up to save him, and you will start to and continue to hear me talk about how I feel about it and her role and how she develops as a character in the read-along for Onyx Storm, because there are just some parts of that evolution that I continue to be a little bit frustrated with. So all of that to say, this is, I liked Fourth Wing a lot. I think it really put me into a place to be invested in the characters and want to know what happened. It gets real in Iron Flame. Everything comes to life in Iron Flame. Realities hit really, really hard. You know, it starts at the end of Fourth Wing with Liam's death, but it really starts to, it doesn't start, it fully forms. Life happens and smacks you in the face in this book. And you know that going into Onyx Storm, it's just going to continue. So I love this writing style. I love the characters. I'm here for it. This is the type of fantasy that I want to be invested in. It's the same vibe I had with ACOTAR and with Throne of Glass in terms of the path that we're on and the ability of these writers to write so well that you immerse in their world. The level of immersion that I had in ACOTAR was more than this, and the level of immersion that I had in Throne of Glass is more than ACOTAR. So this definitely is up there with them, but doesn't precede them in my mind. But it's enough to just put you in the place of feeling things. You're empathetic for the characters. You want them to succeed. You feel everything that they feel. At least I do, as an empathetic reader and a person with a vivid imagination. And I felt everything in this book, and you probably heard it in my recording. I was amped up. I was pretty much at a 9 the whole time, talking about my feelings, and I'm not even actively reading it right now. This was just from me doing, I've read them before. I did research again, and I could get right back in the moment of feeling the frustration with just research. I wasn't even reading the book again. Imagine if I had done these as a read along. That's what is going to be so interesting about listening to these 2 episodes and then going into Onyx Storm. It makes me passionate because it's just, I'm so immersed in it. And you come away from them having gone through so much strife and struggle, and you know that the foundation of what the world is has shifted in this battle in a huge way for a lot of reasons, including the loss of Violet's mom and the state of Xaden, among other things. And the world is going to forever change again. It changed at the beginning of Iron Flame, and now it is forever different because of this battle. And it still is just the beginning. So I appreciate you all so much for hanging tough with me. I hope you were talking, to yourself and processing out loud as if we were gabbing and having, a debrief together. I hope that you are invested. I hope that you liked these as much as I do. And if you didn't, but you liked it enough to listen to the episode, I hope it gives you a more of an appreciation. If you have different thoughts about characters and about the story and the evolution and where we are, if you like it, but you still have different thoughts and feelings about all of it, I want to hear about it. That's what YouTube is for. Like, give me your comments. I want to know where you're coming from as a reader invested in this community and this series right now. And I'm really excited to get into sharing Onyx Storm with you and for that to be more of a digestible series. So I thank you all for listening. I appreciate you for being here. This is the longest that you're probably ever going to hear me in one sitting. So I appreciate you bearing with me. You can tell I'm even losing my voice. It's a labor of love, and I'm really enjoying it. And I hope that you are liking this approach and this content. So I appreciate you all so much. I thank you for being here, for subscribing to the channels, for following along. I'm excited for what's ahead. There's just so much more. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And until next time, friends.